Imagine you could keep one perfect photograph of yourself. Flawless skin, bright eyes, the face you had at your most beautiful, and let that image take the wear instead of you. Every late night, every cruelty, every year, every sin, none of it touches your living face. It all quietly seeps, line by line, into a picture you keep hidden upstairs, turned to the wall where no one will ever look. To the world you stay young, radiant, untouchable. And the real record of who you are becoming rots in the dark, one brushstroke uglier every time you do something you would rather no one saw. That is the bargain at the center of this novel, and here is the thing that should make the hair stand up on your neck. You already made it. Every time you open the front-facing camera and reach for the filter before you post, smoothing, brightening, slimming, choosing the one angle out of 40 that lies just enough. You are keeping a flawless face for the world, while the real you ages somewhere off-screen. Oscar Wilde wrote The Psychology of the Social Media Persona in 1891, more than a century before the first smartphone. He understood that the moment you fall in love with your own polished image, you begin to split in two: the face you show and the self you hide. This is the story of a beautiful young man who got exactly that wish, and of the picture that kept the receipts. The book is The Picture of Dorian Gray, first published in 1890 in a magazine, then revised into a book in 1891 by Oscar Wilde, the most dazzling talker in London, a playwright and wit who dressed like a peacock and treated conversation as a fine art. This was the fin de siecle, the shimmering, decadent end of the Victorian century, and Wilde was the high priest of a movement called aestheticism, which held that beauty needs no excuse, that art exists for its own sake and answers to no moral master. When the novel appeared, respectable critics were scandalized. They called it poisonous. So for the book edition, Wilde added a short preface, a set of glittering commandments that doubles as his whole philosophy of art. In it, he throws the accusation straight back. Wilde writes, "There is no such thing as a moral or an immoral book. Books are well written or badly written. That is all." And he ends the preface with the line that became his banner: "All art is quite useless." Hold on to that provocation, because the novel he wraps it around is doing something sly. Wilde spent his career performing a flawless public self, the wit, the dandy, the man who was never caught without the perfect reply. And only a few years after this book, he was ruined in a courtroom, his hidden life dragged into the light, destroyed by exactly the gap between the public mask and the private man that Dorian Gray is about. He wrote the warning before he lived it. Here is the whole novel in one sentence. A man who worships his own beauty makes a wish to stay forever young, while a portrait ages and corrupts in his place, and slowly learns the one thing image curation can never fix: that the ugliness you hide from the world does not vanish. It accumulates, in secret, on the truest picture of your soul. Everything in the book grows out of that split. Dorian gets to be flawless on the outside precisely because there is now a private place where all the rot can be stored, out of sight. His portrait is the ultimate finster, the locked account, the folder of screenshots you pray no one ever opens. And the horror Wilde builds, patiently, is that the hidden self does not stay hidden forever. The mask and the face underneath it eventually have to be reconciled, and the reckoning is savage. We will walk it in 5 beats: the fatal wish, the actress he never loved, the yellow book and the locked room, the painter who must not see, and the knife in the portrait. Watch how each one is really about a choice we make with a screen in our hands today. First, the fatal wish. A gifted painter named Basil Hallward has made the masterpiece of his life. A full-length portrait of a beautiful young man, Dorian Gray, in whom Basil sees a kind of perfection that has quietly reordered his whole art. Into the studio strolls Basil's friend, the languid, dangerous Lord Henry Wotton, who takes one look at Dorian and begins for sport to pour a philosophy into his ear. Youth and beauty, Henry purrs, are the only things worth having, and they are already fading. Every day Dorian is a little less perfect than he was, and when the beauty goes, he will have nothing. Henry preaches a gospel of pure sensation, of yielding to every impulse. He tells Dorian, the only way to get rid of a temptation is to yield to it. It lands on the boy like a match on dry grass. Standing before his own glorious image, freshly aware for the first time that he will age while the painted Dorian never will, he says the words that curse him. He would give his soul if it could be the other way round. If the picture could grow old and he could stay young. The wish is granted. Think about what Henry is really selling. The belief that your surface is your whole worth, that the polished image is the prize, and the aging self behind it is worthless. That is the exact voice of the culture that tells you your face is your currency and the filter is your friend. The takeaway: the moment you start worshipping your own image, you have signed a contract whose true cost is written in invisible ink. Second, the actress he never loved. Dorian, intoxicated by his new sense of himself, falls for a poor young actress named Sybil Vane, who plays Shakespeare's heroines in a shabby little theatre. But look closely at what he loves. He is enchanted by Juliet, by Rosalind, by the roles, by the exquisite performance, not the trembling girl underneath it. Sybil is, to him, a curated feed of beautiful characters. Then real love arrives and ruins everything in his eyes. Once Sybil truly loves Dorian, the painted passions of the stage feel false to her, and for the first time she acts badly, because she has finally felt the real thing and can no longer counterfeit it. Her acting collapses precisely because her heart has opened. Dorian is disgusted. She has stopped being a flawless image and become a real, awkward, vulnerable person, and he cannot forgive it. He discards her that night with icy cruelty. She kills herself before morning, and when he gets home, he notices it, a faint new touch of cruelty around the mouth of the portrait. The first mark, the first thing the picture has agreed to carry, so his own face doesn't have to. We do this in miniature all the time. We fall for the profile, the highlight reel, the persona, and the instant a person reveals their unedited, imperfect, actual self, we lose interest. We leave them on red. We swipe on. The takeaway: when you love someone only as a beautiful image, you are not loving them at all. And the price of that mistake is sometimes another human being's real, unretouchable life. Third, the yellow book and the locked room. To smother his conscience, Dorian throws himself into a book Lord Henry sends him, a strange, poisonous French novel with no plot but endless, gorgeous descriptions of one man's pursuit of every sensation and sin. Dorian treats it as scripture, and for 18 years he lives by it, sinking into a secret life of drugs, ruined reputations, and pleasures the book never quite names. By day, he is the most admired young man in London society, exquisite, charming, ageless. By night, he haunts opium dens and back streets, and rumours trail him. Friendships that end in disgrace, lives quietly wrecked in his wake. Lord Henry's whole creed is that appearances are the only thing that count. Scandal is only a problem if it is dull. As Henry drawls, "There is only one thing in the world worse than being talked about, and that is not being talked about." And the portrait? Dorian drags it up to the old locked schoolroom at the top of the house, throws a heavy cloth over it, and keeps the only key. Year by year, it grows more monstrous, swollen, aged, cruel, while his face in every mirror stays smooth as a boy's. This is the double life we now live natively. The public account, gleaming and liked, and the second screen, the private tab, the alt, the locked room, where the version of us we would never post quietly accumulates. The takeaway, the self you can hide from everyone, is the one that is actually rotting. Fourth, the painter who must not see. One foggy night, the painter, Basil Hallward, the one man who made the portrait, the one man who loved Dorian purely, comes to confront him about the ugly stories now attached to his name and to beg him to change his life. He asks to see Dorian's soul. Only God can do that, he says. Dorian, with a strange, bitter smile, offers to show him something better. He leads Basil up to the locked room, pulls away the cloth, and lets the man look at what his beautiful portrait has become. The face of a soul, bloated and loathsome, signed in the corner with the painter's own name. Basil is horrified and pleads with Dorian to pray, to repent. And Dorian, seized by a hatred as much for the witness as for the truth he carries, snatches up a knife and stabs the painter to death, then coolly blackmails a former friend into dissolving the body in acid, erasing every trace. He has murdered the one person who saw him clearly and still cared. This is the darkest mirror of all. When someone holds up the part of you that you cannot bear to have seen, the easiest, ugliest fix is to erase them. Cancel, block, delete, silence the witness who remembers who you really are. The takeaway? Killing the person who reflects you does not change the thing in the mirror. The face in the locked room is exactly as vile the morning after as it was the night before. Fifth, the knife in the portrait. The weight of it all finally becomes unbearable. Dorian resolves for once to be good, to spare a country girl he might have ruined, and hurries up to the locked room, hoping the portrait will show one clean, redeemed line. It is worse. A new expression has crept into the painted face, the cunning of a hypocrite, the smirk of a man who plays at virtue for the mirror. He understands at last that the picture is his conscience, that it has recorded not just his crimes, but his vanity and his self-deception, and that he will never be free of it while it exists. So he takes up the same knife that killed the painter and drives it into the canvas to destroy the evidence, to kill the past. There is a terrible cry. The servants rush upstairs and break in. On the wall hangs the portrait, restored. Dorian Gray in all his radiant, untouched youth. And on the floor lies a withered, wrinkled, loathsome dead man in evening dress, a knife in his heart, so unrecognizable that they know him only by the rings on his fingers. The face and the picture have traded places for good. This is the reckoning our whole curated age is built to postpone. You can delete the post, but the screenshot survives. The archive, the record, the algorithm remember. The takeaway, The self you spend a lifetime hiding is, in the end, the only one that turns out to be real. So what does all of it add up to? On the surface, the Picture of Dorian Gray is a gothic horror story. A magic painting, a beautiful monster, a murder, a locked room at the top of a haunted house. But underneath the candlelight and the crackled varnish, Wilde is running one merciless experiment. He grants a man the wish our whole image-obsessed culture is chasing. Perfect surface, permanent youth, all the consequences absorbed by a picture no one sees. And then he shows you, patiently, precisely what it costs. Lord Henry's dazzling gospel that beauty is everything and appearances are all that count is the exact voice of filter culture, of the highlight reel, of the persona economy. Dorian's ageless public face is the profile. The portrait rotting in the attic is the private truth. And Wilde's verdict is quietly devastating. The split does not protect you. Every ugliness you root away from your public image doesn't disappear. It collects in the one place you refuse to look, until the hidden self and the shown self can no longer both exist, and the reckoning takes everything. The book is not a lecture against beauty. Wilde loved beauty more than anyone. It is a warning about worshipping the image of yourself instead of tending the self underneath it. Because the image is a lie you maintain, and the soul is the thing that keeps the real account. Here is the one thing to carry out of this book and into your week. There is a gap in all of us between the self we display and the self we actually are, and it is not evil to have one. Everyone curates, everyone has a public face. The danger Wilde is pointing at is subtler. It is what happens when you start feeding the image and starving the self. When you spend all your care on the surface everyone sees and none on the private person no one does. Until the two drift so far apart that the hidden one becomes a stranger you would be ashamed to meet. So this week, notice the small moments where you choose the mask over the man, the angle over the honesty, the caption over the confession, the version of yourself that gets likes over the version that would tell someone the truth. Dorian's tragedy is not that he had a hidden picture. It is that he never once looked at it and let it change him. The portrait was, all along, an invitation to see himself clearly and become better. And he answered every warning by covering it back up. You have that same portrait. Everyone does. The whole difference is whether you dare to lift the cloth and let what you see there make you kinder, truer, less afraid of being ordinary. Tend the soul in the locked room and it stops being a horror. Ignore it long enough, and one day it is the only face you have left. Oscar Wilde, the most brilliant performer of his age, wrote the definitive study of the performing self 100 years before we all carried a stage in our pockets. Dorian Gray got the wish we are all quietly making, a flawless face for the world and a hidden place to store the rest. And Wilde followed that wish without flinching all the way to the withered stranger on the floor who could only be known by his rings. Keep the perfect image, lose the real self. That is the whole of the bargain and the whole of its price. If this walk through the Picture of Dorian Gray gave you something worth keeping, subscribe. A new classic every week, faithfully, in about 20 minutes. Next time we leave the gaslit drawing rooms of London for something far colder and more powerful. Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, the 250-year-old manual that is still secretly running your entire economy. From the bread on your table to the reason you feel like a replaceable part at work. And tell me in the comments, if your hidden portrait exists somewhere, What is the one thing you most hope no one ever sees painted on it?